You are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
Oklahoma Week 2. We've got Houston Cougars on the schedule. We're going to talk to our guy, Parker Ainsworth with Locked On Cougs, about the Houston Cougars and what they bring to the table in this Week 2 matchup. It's going to be a very fun game for us as Oklahoma fans. Stay tuned because we're going to hear a lot more about the Houston Cougars here on the Sooner Spotlight. Welcome in, Sooner fans, to another episode of Sooner Spotlight. We're very excited to be back with another one. We're going on to Week 2 against Houston. I've got my man Parker Ainsworth with Locked On Cougs. Parker, thank you so much for joining.
It's nice to reconnect, Josh. I'm excited about the game this weekend. Glad to get to talk to some Sooner folks. And we'll jump into the game, but it's good to connect with you again. It's been a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Parker and I knew each other from way back, and so being able to kind of reconnect, realizing that he's still doing some Houston content, trying to dive into Houston a little bit, because Week 2 for Oklahoma, starting off with Week 1, I saw a lot of, maybe I call them overreactions on the offensive line. I think there's really two guys that I called out, and you know what? In today's college football, I'm okay with calling specific players out. If you're getting paid, you're a professional athlete in my mind. But I think the offensive line, definitely some concerns. And then I think obviously we're extremely excited about the defense, and then of course some concerns in the wide receiver room. But overall, excited about this team. I think that's an overall theme for Oklahoma going into the SEC, and what that means for us. But when we talk about the Houston Cougars, we saw them a year ago, but they were with a different coach. You've got Willie Fritz now coming in as a first-year head coach at the Houston Cougars. I like that addition. If you're going to get rid of Dana Holgorsen, I think Willie Fritz was the right guy. I like that quite a bit. So, so far with Willie Fritz coming to Houston, what are Houston fans seeing so far from Willie Fritz coming over there?
Well, I think people are excited with the hire. Willie Fritz has been a name thrown in a lot of Power 4 head coaching searches in the last 3 or 4 years. I don't know if folks know, he was the guy at Tulane the last handful, a little over half a decade. And frankly, Tulane has never been any good, and he made Tulane pretty good on a national level for a Group of 5 program. Put some guys in the pros from there as well. And he'll tout that there are several guys in the NFL that went through his program at Tulane where they were the only Division I offer for the kid. He's got a real eye for diamond in the rough kind of guys. He just got to Houston, and the rebuild is very, very early on in the process. And I think that there are some people that are like having their eyes open, like, oh, we're really starting at ground zero. You mentioned Dana Holgorsen left. When he left, it's modern college football. A bunch of guys jumped the transfer portal. Receivers starting at Miami and Texas, defensive linemen starting at TCU, Oregon, and Colorado. I mean, guys that are the real deal. Oh, and then they had 2 guys drafted in the NFL, and people left the roster, right? And so The rebuild is early on. I think Fritz is consensus appreciated as the right guy, but it is a work in progress still, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things too. You've got to be patient. I mean, take a look at Oklahoma. We hired Brent Venables. Everyone was very excited about that. It was a huge blow to the gut though when we saw 6-6. Understanding the roster left, and then the very next year, 10-3 if you include the bowl game. So a real rebuild is going to take a little bit of time. You've got to get your guys in, and like you said, Willie Fritz. I was hyping him up when I was talking about Houston earlier on, kind of in the preseason, and looking back at what he did with Tulane. Tulane came back and made it a very close game, and a game that the Oklahoma Sooners were running away with just a few years ago. So, taking a look at that game and seeing what Willie Fritz is made of, he's a great coach.
I will say both as an institution, obviously a whole lot of folks are left at the U of H from the 2016 team, but as an institution and as a coaching staff that Fritz has put together, there's not a lot of people scared of Norman from a big school perspective. There's a talent discrepancy, right? The Vegas line is what the Vegas line is for a reason. But I don't think Fritz is going to be intimidated. As you mentioned, he went up there a few years back, kind of in the middle of the Tulane run, right? Before it they took out USC a couple years later. So I think he'll be he'll be okay and ready. It's just there is a big talent gap that I'm sure we're going to talk through here in a second that Houston's going to have to find a way to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that you look back at Houston too. They don't have maybe the storied program of a blue blood, maybe as an Alabama or Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma, any of these big name teams, but they still had some very good seasons. I mean, you look back at and what they've done in recent years. I mean, I can remember not too long ago when they upset Baker Mayfield and the Oklahoma Sooners. So this is a program that I think, from my understanding, Houston's trying to piece together that football team and make them worth something to watch, right?
Yeah, and so it's no secret that there's a lot of talent in the greater Houston area. It is usually gone through by UT Austin, Texas A&M, LSU. Frankly, y'all at Oklahoma take a couple kids as well every year, right? It's a ton of talent there, and if you could keep the kids in the city, you have a pretty good team. They aren't a blue blood by normal stretches. They do have a Heisman Trophy winner from the late '80s, Andre Ware, and frankly, in the '70s and '80s, they were pretty strong. They were inventive with the veer offense and things like that. Then the Southwest Conference falls apart. Houston doesn't get that Big 12 bid. They don't have the money to keep up for a long time. They have the Case Keenums and stuff like that were fun. And Case had an incredible college career, right? But getting into the Big 12 recently has really kind of sparked that, okay, can we get back to being on the national level like they were in the late 80s? Can we get back to those kinds of things from in a football perspective? Because you kind of need that. I mean, as well as anyone, you don't jump to the SEC for money. Not like in a negative way. I hope they don't come off negatively.
No,
but
not at all.
The truth is that to keep a high-powered college football program, you need a lot of cash. And so finding ways into these power conferences for a program like Houston that, again, got left out in the mid-90s, it has been really important. And in putting all these pieces together, I don't mean to overhype it to a Sooner fan, right? Y'all have been a national program for a long time, but it feels like we're trying to wake up a sleeping giant. Like if you keep all the Houston kids in the city of Houston, you're going to be all right. So finding ways to get that done is going to be really important.
Yeah, definitely. And like I told you right before we hit record too, I think I'm excited for Houston. I think Houston's one of those teams too that, especially hiring Willie Fritz, I'm excited to see what they're able to do with the Big 12, and I think Houston's one of those teams that's going to keep the Big 12 alive too. But looking forward to this game here specifically here in Week 2, Houston comes into Norman, and like you said, it's not necessarily coming to Norman because Willie Fritz, he was ready to go against Oklahoma. He was going to face them either way, whether he left Tulane or not, because we have them next week.
The next week.
Yeah. So he was going to come to Norman one way or another, and he was not afraid of that at all. And the last time that he came here with Michael Pratt at quarterback, they put up a really good fight. And I can't remember. I believe Tajay Spears might have even been on that team as well. Mm-hmm. So Willie Fritz had some dogs over there on that team. And then, like you said, later on going up to upset USC, Willie Fritz is ready, and I think he's trying to instill that into the Houston program. But so far, obviously, like you mentioned, the Vegas line isn't really showing much of a competition here. But what does Houston really expect to accomplish in this game going up to Norman?
I think it's unfortunate to say, like, trying to get some things right, because Oklahoma's not really the kind of an opponent that you typically associate with that. But first game out the gates last week against UNLV did not go as planned. I would stress that UNLV is a really good Group of 5 team that, with a Group of 5 team guaranteed a playoff spot, thinks they have a playoff spot, that they can go get. And so, we'll see where that go-go offense they've got ends up. I think Houston feels pretty good about their defense. It's figuring a lot of question marks on the offense side of the ball. And Willie Fritz is kind of more of a defensive guy. The offense coordinator is a guy named Kevin Barbay, who came in from Mississippi State. He'd been at Appalachian State before that. And it feels like a lot of newness on that side of the ball. And I that didn't work out very well against UNLV, to say the very least. But I think, you're going to try and, you got some game tape now to work from and practice off of. And guess the old college coach mantra is you get a lot better between week 1 and 2 than you do get between basically any other weeks of the season, right? Because you finally have game film to break down. So I think they're hoping to, as talented as the Oklahoma defensive front is, they're hoping to, put some things together on offense that they can build from. I'm not going to lie to you. Houston probably wants this to be a low scoring game because that means you got a better chance.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out. But that's I think where they're at this point is just trying to build off of some things and some of the newness and shaking off all that from last week.
Yeah, and it's definitely a weird feeling in first year of a rebuild. You're trying not to be down on your team, but you're also like trying not to set the expectation that we're going to go and beat Oklahoma, or even starting off in week 1, you can say, man, that was disappointing, but there's a rebuild, and we just have to trust the process ultimately. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was to say exactly. It's about trusting the process and understanding that there's going to be lumps along the way. Houston was a close game, but Houston, I guess, was a favorite last week. Houston is not a favorite this week, right? And probably only has one more game this season against Rice where they will be a favorite. And that's just the reality of it. They're going to bring in some talent. They had a couple high-end 2025 kids committed. They're going to try and hit the transfer portal as hard as anyone. I mean, they'll do all those things in the offseason. But right now it's about building a culture of sorts, and that may mean you take some lumps along the way, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. And Oklahoma's one of those that, I like we both mentioned, no one's probably going to put a whole lot of money or a whole lot of stock into Houston winning this game, but there will definitely be individuals that you want to see stand out on your roster, specifically with a rebuild. And going against an Oklahoma team, what better team to stand out and to show the coaches, hey, I'm a guy that's worth putting some stock into, a guy worth building and trying to build around. Hey Sooner fans, interrupting this episode really quick just to let you guys know that if you would like to help support the podcast, of course, a free and easy way to do it is by hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button down below, and please comment down below as well. Another great way to help us out financially, and all of the proceeds go towards supporting this podcast directly, is by going over to our merch store. You can find that link down in the description below. You can find shirts like the one that I'm wearing right now, Plant Our Flag in the SEC, a great one for as we are planting our flag in the SEC as at the Oklahoma Sooners. There's also hats and so much more. Hats like this one here, Boomer Sooner 24, because it's election season. Why not go vote for Boomer Sooner to run SEC country? But there's so much more over there, and we're going to keep on adding on to it. But we're going to do all kinds of giveaways with that merch store and stuff as well. So please go over and check that out. That link is down in the description below. But we're going to get back to Parker Ainsworth and the Houston Cougar talk. What are some players that we should know from Houston to watch as Oklahoma fans?
Honestly, I think the defense is a lot more big game ready than the offense is. And so on the defense, Keith Cooper is a defensive end who came over from Tulane with Willie Fritz, has pro potential. And so I think part of that was he wanted to get in the Big 12. He saw this opportunity to get in the Big 12 with a coach he knew. And is he frankly had a pretty good game last week against UNLV. I would stress UNLV averaged about 40 points a game last year, and Houston only gave up 27, and 7 of those points were a pick six. The defense, again, feels pretty strong. Also on the D-line, a guy named Anthony Holmes or A.J. Holmes. He is a defense tackle that was a rotational guy last year. They're hoping for a lot more out of this year. The fun guy to watch on defense is a safety named A.J. Halsey. He's a junior that was a start off at University of New Mexico before transferring in last year. And he feels like an old, 2004 kind of safety where he is looking to really – it gets a penalty every now and then, but he is looking to inflict some damage when he comes through the middle, which is fun to watch. You don't want the 15-yarders, but it's fun to watch.
Yeah, well, Jay and I last week we were talking about there at the game, and then he also had another guy with him, Coop, that we were all talking about. I'd like to see a couple of those penalties. So the penalties aren't always a bad thing. If it's because you're being an aggressive defensive player, that's not necessarily always a bad thing.
No, exactly. You'd rather coach that out of a kid than try and coach it into a kid, I guess. On the offense side of the ball, there's all kinds of trying to figure out who they are and what their identity is still, right? So Barbay as a coordinator at Mississippi State was more of a run-first guy. there were like 6 running back carries against UNLV. And so we're like, wait, what's the deal there? I like the running backs. I like the starter, Parker Jenkins. He's a sophomore. He was a high-end kid from the Houston area that stayed home. There are a lot of running backs across college football, so there's probably some of that too, but he stayed home. The receiver room's talented. The truth is that they had some trouble up front. A lot of new faces on the starting line last week. A lot of guys with their first start in Division I football last week, and so it's like, wait a second, this is this is the real deal, right? And so, second start of the year going against guys from the Oklahoma front, like Dominic Williams or the other guys, Jaden Jackson, the other defense tackle. Those are very big people to be having your second start of your college career against. But ultimately, I think that's just the cards they're dealt. It's new faces. The quarterback, Donovan Smith, I know I'm rambling here at this point, but he's a guy that came he came to Houston last year from Tech. He tore his labrum mid-season and played the rest of the year with it, and then had surgery in the offseason, so he missed spring ball, which ultimately is kind of hard with the new coaching staff. And he looked like a guy that hadn't played a lot of football in the first game. Again, he had a major shoulder injury, and so he's I don't know how much, or he got cleared in June, but it's still kind of when did he really start doing real things? Hadn't been hit in a long time either, and he just kind of didn't look like himself. There were some people who thought he had an outside shot to be drafted in the 2025 NFL draft. He is 6'5", 245. I mean, he looks the part. So we'll see what kind of bounce back he has, if he's shaking off that rust, or if the offense doesn't fit him. People are calling for backup quarterbacks, as well as anyone in this industry. Backup quarterback's always the most popular guy as soon as things start going south, right? And so I'm sure there'll be some calls for that if this game does go south fast. But Donovan's the starter. He will be the starter. And frankly, it should be his job to lose. He played all right last year. And I think that, it'd be pretty quick to pull the plug in week 2, but what do I know?
Well, especially with a new offense, you've got a lot of new pieces over there. You've got to give him, you've got to be a little patient with him and give him some time. Give him some time to, try to get back in the swing of things as well. And yeah, like you said, the backup quarterback, very popular. We heard that a lot whenever Spencer Rattler got sat out by Caleb Williams, and the kind of disrespect that Spencer Rattler got was not one that I approved of at all, but definitely something that you definitely see in sports, specifically with college football. That's the thing that makes college football so fun, is that you can sit there and chant for your backup quarterback to come in that you don't even know who he is and how he's going to perform.
Yeah, the last time the guy played was against someone who was taking algebra 2, but we wanted him to come play in front of 100,000 people. Like it's kind of a crazy concept, right? There are no preseason games. We don't see a whole bunch of inter-team or like scrimmage against other schools and stuff like that. So we don't really have a lot of things to work with. Like, people like the backup quarterback at Houston because he came in and had a drive against the UNLV third string and scored a touchdown. Well, okay, like what's that like? Cool. He was playing against the third string safety is the guy that he beat for the touchdown pass.
Yeah.
It's not really an apples to apples kind of thing. But again, y'all are not unfamiliar with that. You've had a number of different quarterbacks come through, including the guy on your shirt, right? I mean, you got a lot of guys that have come through there and played the position. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but
and you know what? The funny thing is, Baker's first 2 starts, I was like, I'm just not sure about this guy, and I said the backup quarterback's name. So I'm definitely guilty.
And I totally get it with Baker. He was a walk-on at Tech,
such an
transfers over.
Such an unorthodox
he's little
method of play too. So I mean, the thing that killed me wasn't that he wasn't. So he was proving me wrong, but he just looked so indecisive. Whenever he would sit there and scramble around and make some sort of play, kind of like a Johnny Manziel type of just scramble around and look for something random. And that was something that I didn't like when I first saw him, but then I got used to it and understood, like, hey, just trust the dude. Let Baker bake.
Baker bake. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Going on to this game, bringing up what the line sits at. Houston's a plus 2,000 underdog. So if you had enough faith in them to put some money on, you'd make some good cheddar by taking that. And it looks like the line went down to 28. I would expect that to bump up, but instead went down to 28. And so I'm interested to see where that moves by the time we get to game time. But the current, I had to refresh to make sure I get the current line right now, Oklahoma being a 28-point favorite. What's your overall predictions for this game in Houston, Oklahoma, coming up to Norman to play the Oklahoma Sooners?
I obviously am a Houston fan, so I guess your listeners probably need to take with that grain of salt. 28 sounds like a lot to me, and I think that's because I think pretty highly of Houston's defense. I think pretty highly of Willie Fritz's coaching, and he's a defensive coach. And for what it's worth, and I'll be interested to get your 2 cents on this too, as someone who watched them more closely, I feel like they look like there are problems on the Oklahoma offensive line. They won 51-3, so obviously won a bunch of problems, but they had short fields and they defense forced a bunch of turnovers, and I guess special teams might have had 1 or 2 if I didn't watch the games closely as you did, obviously.
Yeah, special teams had one touchdown there, 6 turnovers, which caused a lot of short fields. And so, that's why I think a lot of Sooner fans or even outside media are like, hey, they didn't even get 400 total yards. This is unlike Oklahoma, but that definitely plays.
And I didn't watch them last year because Houston didn't play them. But Jackson Arnold is new to starting. I don't know how much he played last year for them. I know he's a high-end recruit. He's like a future pro as far as his high school recruiting stuff goes, right?
5-star recruit, but he really only played a little bit of the BYU game and then started in that Arizona bowl game, which everyone would not take with a grain of salt, and I kept on telling everybody, calm down. That's not what Jackson Arnold's going to look like when he gets comfortable and gets used to a system that literally just changed going into that game. But
so I say all to say that I feel like this could be, if Oklahoma's winning by 28, to me that means Houston didn't score. I don't see this being a 55-0 kind of game, just because I think the things Houston's strong at defensively could take advantage of that a little bit. I say that fully admitting that I think Oklahoma's strength is their front 7, and Houston's weakness last week was the 5 guys they got blocking. I understand that Houston probably also won't score a whole lot of points in this one, but that seems like a really wide margin. And when I saw it, I was looking at where Locked On's a FanDuel company. I was looking at FanDuel earlier in the week. I think the over-under was like at 54, and I was like, that also seemed high. So I guess I say that if you like offense, this might not be the game for you, is what I would predict. And then obviously, as folks who listen to Locked On Cougs know, I talk myself up by every Friday into Houston winning. So I have talked myself into it happening. I'll do that all week long or all year long. And last year they won 4 games. That means I was wrong 8 times, right? Like that's just I talked myself
you were
into
right
it
4 times. That's all you got to say. Yeah, I was right 4 times when you guys said I wouldn't be.
Exactly. We beat West Virginia, darn it.
Yeah. So what's your overall score prediction for this one then?
So right now I'm at 24-21. And I am 24-21 Houston. I think the deal will be, it almost feels like with how weird the offense looked last week relative to what Barbay did at Mississippi State, they're holding on to something. I don't know what it is, but it's almost like there's like, okay, are they going to come out with the 22 personnel like that they didn't want to show? Like what are they holding on to, right? I also think that there's been talk all week about getting the running backs more involved because they weren't very involved last week. That would slow the game down some. Not that it's easy running against the Oklahoma front 7, but that would slow the game down some. And then I think the defense for Houston's going to continue to excel. I think there are ways to trick a young quarterback and getting a couple turnovers out of it. And again, like I said, I think Willie Fritz has shown he can get his guys ready to play up a division, for lack of a better phrase, right? When he was at Tulane, he had those guys ready to play Oklahoma, USC, Ole Miss, right? He's had his guys ready before in a way that I'm assuming he'll be able to replicate. It might be early on in his tenure at Houston, but I'm assuming he would do the same kind of thing again. I imagine you're probably swinging the other direction on it, though.
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from too, because Oklahoma's offense, let's be honest, they held back a lot. That was one thing that Brent Venables and other coaching staff said, hey, we just held back. We ran a vanilla offense because we didn't want to, for one, hurt anybody. Let's get out of week 1 against Temple because we know we're going to win. And then on top of that, why show off your playbook when you don't have to? And I think very similar. I think they're going to open it up a little bit more to Houston, but they're going to be very similar. And so it's not going to be a ton of scoring like we're used to seeing from Oklahoma, scoring 60 or 70 points against this kind of an opponent. So I can totally understand that. My preseason prediction before seeing either of these two teams, play, it was right. I think I said 45-17, if memory serves me correctly. And that's because, and I talked up Willie Fritz, and I feel like he is going to find a way to just come in there and shock Oklahoma fans, saying, why are we this close? And so that covering the spread seems kind of far-fetched, but I also just have enough faith in this defense that maybe after seeing what they did week 1, I don't think this defense is going to allow 17 points now. So, I'm with you. I'm thinking I'm bringing Oklahoma's score down a little bit. I'm feeling more like 38-3, 38-6, somewhere in that range. So I still think that Oklahoma covers personally.
Right.
But obviously that's kind of the difference in what we
where we're
each know
coming
about
from.
our own programs.
Yeah, and I would say that I'd be lying if I didn't think part of the reason I'd give Houston any edge I give them is that this is a lot more trappy feeling for Oklahoma than it would be. Whereas Houston, it's like, this is a pretty big deal, right? There's no, I mean,
what do you have to lose if you went and you lost to Oklahoma and Norman?
Yeah, exactly. They're like, the only thing you can do is help your reputation in this one if you're Houston, because everyone's already written you off, right? And so I really think that also plays a factor in the psyche of it. I would be lying if I didn't, in checking out our own Locked On Sooners folks or in doing research and checking out Sooners content. There's a lot of talk about Tennessee and Oklahoma already.
Oh yeah,
you got 2 games between now and then, and I know you know that, but these are college kids too, right? So there's some level of that I think is very natural to happen. It's why college football is so fun, is that happens a lot more in college football than pro football.
Yeah, definitely. And Oklahoma is preparing for that. That Tennessee game is the biggest game of the season at that moment. So yeah, I mean, you talk about Temple, Houston, Tulane, you're not too worried as an Oklahoma fan because you should be able to win those just fine. And that showed to be true against Temple, and you'd hope that it would show true against Houston. Get out of that game, but obviously the team, we definitely want them to focus each guy, or each team as we go along. But I mean, I don't hate your prediction at all, and I'm sure there will be no overreactions in the comments at all. So prepare yourself, because I know Oklahoma fans will have something to say. But Parker, I appreciate you very much for coming on, kind of filling us as Oklahoma fans in on the Houston Cougars a little bit more. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, Locked On Cougars, daily show on Houston Cougars. We do football and basketball. I don't mean to bring up bad memories for Sooners fans from last year's men's basketball game, but Houston's a pretty basketball-centric school these days. Skelton's got a great program going. So we cover both sports pretty thoroughly throughout the year, every day, wherever you get your podcast. And on Twitter, X, or whatever social media you're looking for, I'm at Ainsworth 512, PAINSWORTH 512. And you can come tell me I'm wrong wherever you want to. You wouldn't be the first. That's the way those things go, I guess. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a fun one this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be a fun game regardless. And I think you'll see some things that you say, you know what, even though, if it comes to a loss, even though we lost, I like what Willie Fritz did here, trying to spice some things up here. I have a lot of respect for Willie Fritz, and like I said, I'm excited for the Cougars. I'm excited for them hiring the right guy, in my opinion, and going forward into the Big 12. I'm excited to see who ends up funneling towards that gaping hole there in the Big 12 now that Oklahoma and Texas are gone.
Yeah, and I'll leave on this. The thing I've been preaching all week is this game's kind of a measuring stick. We play in 2024, and the other half of this home and home is 2028. Those are 2 very different ends of the Willie Fritz tenure. I'm sure we'll talk again between now and 2028, Josh, but I like the way that sets up for his time at Houston. Is we have this game, we'll see each other in 2028, and I don't think Oklahoma's going anywhere, right? So hopefully that proves to be a good measuring stick where whatever happens this weekend, and again, I think Houston's going to shock some people.
Yeah.
But we look at 2020 as, okay, we got 4 seasons to get to where that is not the case. Something else, something different happens, right?
Maybe it's more of a Tom Herman-esque, Houston Cougars by the time you get there.
Tom Herman had a whole different thing. I mean, he came in and he flipped it around. He got Ed Oliver, which helps, and he flipped it around fast.
Yeah, absolutely. But Parker, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks again, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Sooner fans, did you enjoy this video? Well, go ahead and hit that like button and go ahead and hit that subscribe button. What are you doing if you've made it this far and haven't already? You should be able to find that subscribe button over here. And then if you want to see full episodes, we've got those up here and clips right down here. So go check that out. But We thank you all so much for all the love, all the support. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.